I found out my fiancé had a secret wife. If you think you've heard every cheating story on the internet, trust me, this one is on a completely different level. So, this happened about a year ago, and honestly, even now it still feels unreal. I was 28 years old and engaged to a guy I'll call Ryan. We had been together for almost 4 years, and from the outside, we looked like the perfect couple. We met through mutual friends, moved in together after a year, adopted a cat, and 6 months before everything fell apart, he proposed during a weekend trip to the mountains. Of course, I said yes. Everyone loved him. My parents thought he was respectful. My friends said I had finally found the one. Even my coworkers joked that I'd become one of those annoying people who couldn't stop talking about wedding plans, and honestly, they weren't wrong. I was obsessed with planning the wedding. Every lunch break was spent comparing venues, flowers, dresses, photographers. Everything. Ryan always acted supportive, even though he claimed he wasn't interested in the details. He'd always smile and say, "Babe, whatever makes you happy." Looking back, that should have been my first clue, not because he wasn't helping, but because he never seemed excited. It was almost like he was just waiting. Still, I ignored it. I figured not everyone gets excited over seating charts and cake flavors. Then something strange started happening. Ryan worked in software, and every few weeks he'd have to travel for client meetings. Usually 2 or 3 days, nothing unusual except these trips started happening more often. At first it was once every couple of months, then suddenly, every other weekend. Whenever I asked where he was going, his answer was always incredibly vague. Just out of town. The client's office. Somewhere boring. I joke that he sounded like he was in a spy movie. He'd laugh. Then immediately change the subject again. I brushed it off, because trust isn't something you question every day, or at least. It shouldn't be. About 3 months before our wedding, I was sitting on my couch after work when my phone buzzed. It was a Facebook message request. Normally, I ignore those, but something made me open it. The profile belonged to a woman I'd never seen before. No mutual friends, no explanation, just one sentence. "I think we're engaged to the same man." Actually laughed. I remember showing my cat and saying, "People are so weird." I assumed it was spam or maybe someone trying to start drama, so I ignored it. 5 minutes later, another message appeared. "Know this sounds insane. Please just look at the pictures." Against my better judgment, I opened them. The first photo showed Ryan sitting in a restaurant, nothing suspicious. The second photo made my stomach drop. Ryan was holding hands with the woman who messaged me. She was smiling directly at the camera. Both of them were wearing wedding rings. I immediately convinced myself they were fake, photoshopped, old pictures, anything. I even checked the metadata, hoping the date would prove me right. Instead, the timestamp showed it had been taken just 2 weeks earlier, the exact weekend Ryan told me he was staying overnight for a client meeting. I couldn't breathe. I stared at those photos for what felt like an hour. Then I noticed something even stranger. The restaurant. I recognized it, not because I'd been there. Because Ryan had sent me a selfie from that same trip, except in his version. He cropped the picture so tightly that nobody else could be seen. My hands started shaking. I messaged the woman back. "Who are you?" She replied almost instantly. "My name is Emily." Then another message. "Been married to Ryan for 3 years." I read it over and over and over again. Married, not ex-wife, not separated, married. At this point, I was convinced there had to be some mistake. Maybe another Ryan. Maybe someone who looked exactly like him, so I asked the obvious question. "Can we video call?" She answered immediately, within seconds. My phone started ringing. The moment I picked up, everything changed, because behind Emily, hanging on the wall, was a framed wedding photo, and standing beside her in a black tuxedo, smiling at the camera, was my fiancé, not someone who looked like him, not his twin, Ryan. The same man who had kissed me goodbye just 3 days earlier before leaving on another so-called business trip. At that moment, I realized this wasn't just cheating. This was something much bigger. And I had absolutely no idea how deep the lies went. I don't even know how long I sat there staring at my phone. Emily didn't say anything for a few seconds. She just looked at me with the same confused expression I probably had on my face. Finally, she asked, "So, how long have you been with Ryan?" I answered quietly. "Almost 4 years." Color completely drained from her face, she whispered, "I've been married to him for 3." Neither of us spoke. It felt like we were both trying to process the exact same nightmare at the same time. Then she said something that caught me completely off guard. "I don't think either of us is the other woman." That sentence hit me harder than anything else, because she wasn't yelling, she wasn't accusing me. She genuinely believed we'd both been lied to, so instead of arguing, We started comparing timelines. When did you meet him? Where did he say he worked? What does he do on weekends? Where does he say he travels? Every answer matched almost perfectly, except whenever he was supposedly on a business trip. He was actually living his other life. It was like someone had split one calendar into two completely different realities. He spent weekdays with me, some weekends with Emily. Then somehow convinced both of us that his disappearing acts were completely normal. The more we talked, the more impossible it became. Emily even laughed at one point, not because anything was funny, but because she couldn't believe how carefully planned everything was. Then she showed me something that made my skin crawl, their anniversary photos. Every single anniversary happened during one of Ryan's mandatory work conferences. I opened my own camera roll, sure enough, on those exact weekends. I had texted him things like, "Good luck with your meetings." He always replied with photos from hotel rooms, coffee shops, conference halls. Now I realized something. The hotel photos never actually showed him, just the room, the coffee, the laptop, nothing proving where he really was. He'd been creating fake evidence the entire time. That's when Emily asked me a question. "Have you ever been to his parents' house?" I froze. No. Ryan always had an excuse. His parents were traveling, they were renovating. Someone was sick, something always came up. Then I asked her the same question. She looked embarrassed. Neither have I. We both just stared at each other. How does someone date one woman for 4 years, marry another, and somehow keep every part of their lives completely separate? It sounded impossible. Yet here we were. Living proof. Then Emily said, "I want to show you something." She walked into another room when she came back. She was holding a small photo album. Inside were dozens of pictures, birthdays, vacations, family dinners, Ryan with people I'd never seen before, parents, cousins, friends, an entire life I didn't even know existed. I felt sick because I suddenly realized I wasn't his real life. Neither of us knew which version was real anymore. Then another surprise. Emily flipped to the last page. There was a picture taken just 2 months earlier. Ryan standing beside a woman around 60 years old. He had his arm around her. "That's his mom," Emily said. I zoomed in. Something looked familiar, not the woman, the location. I had seen that exact house before. Then it clicked. Ryan once told me he rented an Airbnb during a work trip. He even sent me pictures from the backyard. It wasn't an Airbnb. It was his mother's house. Every lie started connecting together like puzzle pieces. At this point, I wanted to confront him immediately. Drive home, throw the engagement ring at him, demand answers. Emily stopped me. If we confront him now, he'll deny everything. We'll never know the full truth. She was right, so we made a plan. Neither of us would tell him anything for 1 week. We'd simply watch, no accusations, no emotional messages, just observe honestly. That week felt longer than the entire 4 years we'd been together. Every text he sent suddenly had a different meaning. Working late, landed safely. Client dinner. Each message felt rehearsed, like lines from a script he'd perfected over years. Then Wednesday night, something happened that changed everything. Ryan texted me, "Bad news. I have another business trip this weekend." I looked at the message, then immediately called Emily. She answered before the first ring finished, without saying hello. She simply read a text out loud. "Can't wait for our anniversary dinner this weekend, same man." Two completely different stories. That was the moment we realized. We finally had a chance to catch him in his own lie, and this time, he wasn't going to see it coming. The plan sounded simple, but carrying it out, that was the hardest part. For the next 3 days, I had to act like everything was completely normal. Ryan came home Thursday evening carrying my favorite takeout. He kissed me on the forehead like he always did and asked how work was. I smiled, made small talk. Even laughed at one of his terrible jokes. Inside, though, I felt like I was sitting across from a complete stranger. Every time he looked at me, I kept thinking, how many times have you practiced lying? Friday morning finally arrived. Ryan rolled his suitcase into the living room. "Only be gone until Sunday night," he said. Then he hugged me. "Love you." I hugged him back. 2. Safe travels. Second, the apartment door closed. I locked it behind him and just stood there in silence. My heart was racing. Not because I missed him, because I knew exactly where he was going. About 20 minutes later, Emily texted me. "He's on his way." Plan was simple. She would let him arrive at the house like nothing was wrong. About 30 minutes later, I'd show up. No warning, no dramatic phone calls, just walk in. If he really was living 2 lives, there would be no way to explain it. Emily had already told me she would leave the front door unlocked. As I drove over, I kept thinking, what if this is all some misunderstanding? What if there's an explanation deep down? I already knew there wasn't. I parked a little farther down the street. It was a quiet neighborhood. Kids were riding bikes. Someone was mowing their lawn. It looked like the kind of place where absolutely nothing dramatic ever happened. I walked up the driveway. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. Emily opened the door before I even knocked. She looked just as nervous as I felt. She whispered, "He's in the kitchen." I nodded for a second, neither of us moved. Then we walked in together. Ryan was standing at the counter opening a bottle of wine. He looked up casually, smiled, and then he saw me. I've never seen someone's face lose color that quickly. The smile disappeared instantly. The wine bottle slipped from his hand and hit the floor. It didn't break. But the sound echoed through the entire house. For what felt like forever, nobody spoke. Finally, Ryan managed to say, "What are you doing here?" I couldn't believe those were the first words out of his mouth, not "I'm sorry." "I can explain, just, what are you doing here?" Emily folded her arms. "I think the better question is, what are you doing here?" Ryan looked from her to me, then back again. His brain was clearly trying to come up with a story, any story. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally, he said, "This isn't what it looks like." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was the most predictable thing he could have said. I replied, "Really? Then tell me what it looks like." He stayed silent. Emily spoke next. "You going to tell her I'm your wife? Or should I?" Ryan rubbed both hands over his face, then, unbelievably, he tried to convince us we were both misunderstanding the situation. He claimed we were important people in his life, that he had been trying to figure things out, that he never meant for anyone to get hurt. Notice something, he still hadn't answered a single direct question, so I asked one. "Long?" He looked down at the floor. 3 years. Emily looked at him in disbelief. "So you knew exactly what you were doing?" He didn't answer. Then I asked something I'd been wondering since this whole nightmare started. "Why propose to me?" He sighed. "I thought I could make it work." That sentence, more than anything else, was the moment I realized there was nothing left to save, not because he admitted the truth, but because he genuinely seemed to believe that living two completely separate lives was something he could eventually sort out. Like it was a scheduling problem, not a betrayal. I quietly took the engagement ring off my finger, walked over, placed it on the kitchen counter. I hope it was worth it. Then I turned around and walked toward the front door. Behind me, I could hear him calling my name. I didn't stop. I didn't look back, because after 4 years together, there was nothing left to hear.